the United States and a number of other European countries have agreed to a sprawling prisoner exchange deal with Putin. This gets back a number of U.S. citizens held in Russia, but just what do the U.S. have to give up to make it happen? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is an interesting story. Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan are now free. Now, you might remember these two individuals. Evan was a Wall Street Journal reporter, and Paul Whelan was a kind of former U.S. Marine. He was in the Marine Corps Reserves and then got a bad conduct discharge, which is kind of means even the Marines didn't want him. He's also some kind of basically petty criminal. But he's still a U.S. citizen, and like upstanding reporter, unironically, there's no evidence that Mr. Gershkovich is anything other than a reporter, are now free following the biggest prisoner exchange since the Cold War. And it wasn't just the United States that made this happen. This was actually a multi-country effort from Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway, even Turkey chipping in. This is a total of 24 prisoners are being exchanged in this deal. 16 individuals who had been detained in Russia are being returned to the United States or Europe in exchange for 8 individuals held in either the US, Germany, Norway, Slovenia, and Poland. Turkey and its intelligence apparatus said that it provided some of the logistical support to facilitate the swap. Namely, it seems that Ankara was the middle ground, so to speak, the literal place where the exchange occurred. Now, who exactly did the U.S. get back? They got a Russian-American journalist who was working for Radio Free Liberty, Radio Europe, when they were arrested in Russia in 2020. Another journalist of Russian-British descent, Vladimir Kara-Murza, and of course, among those returned to Russia was notably a hitman, Vadim Krasikov. This is an individual who had been arrested and imprisoned in Germany for the last 3 years for conducting essentially an assassination, like a classic wet works, blast from the past, Cold War style assassination. Moscow, this was their sort of number one guy they wanted back, a Russian agent who, again, murdered a Kremlin dissident in a Berlin park. And if there's one thing we know about some of this behavior, it's that the West can actually get itself together and it can get pretty pissed when Russia starts using their own territory as a shooting gallery. And that seems to be what happened here. There was also talk, actually, about trying to get Alexei Navalny released from Russian prison. Of course, that seems like a kind of a waste of time because Navalny, after he was poisoned the first time by the Putin regime, was offered asylum by Germany. Germany was like, we can keep you safe, just stay here. And Navalny was like, nah, I'm all right, and went back to Russia. So it's not clear that any deal with Alexei Navalny would have held any weight, but the U.S. is saying that a lot of these folks who are held were subject to what they called show trials, sentenced to long prison terms for no legitimate reason. Of course, Putin claims everyone he arrested was totally a Western spy. And while some of these individuals are more credible than others, the important takeaway is that this is more a sign of the ability of Western countries to collaborate and coordinate to get these kind of deals done. This is hugely important for future exchanges with the U.S. and Russia, and is again should be taken as a sign that overall relations between the two countries, right, key communications are still firmly in place. Now, Biden said, while this is a huge relief for everyone, it's still crucial that Putin is still a thug and a massive, Biden still has no desire to meet or talk to Putin. This is still, so there is still on one level animosity between Russia and the United States around Ukraine, but they're still able to get these kind of deals done. If there's one thing you should take away from this entire series of events, don't travel to Russia. I don't know what else to tell you. You can see that, again, these individuals are quite happy to be back. And But we're going to take a look real quick about just who these folks are. But before we do, of course, I want to mention that if you're interested in some of the uncensored combat footage coming to us straight from the front line and a exclusive Q&A with me, you want to become a member of combatvetnews.com. You guys know one of the reasons I can say anything I want on this channel and give you guys honest, unbiased analysis is because the only thing that constrains me is YouTube's terms of service. I'm not beholden to a sponsor or an investor. You guys support me, and that enables me to do this every single day. And if you want access to those videos that YouTube won't let me show you, namely the GoPro footage and drone footage coming to us straight from the front lines, that is available on combatvetnews.com. So if you want to support at the specialist tier, that gets you those twice a week uncensored combat videos. But if you want to support at a higher tier, get you access to the Q&A every week. You can submit questions. I'll answer them. And of course, different levels of shout out every single month. So check us out, combatvetnews.com. Link is in the description. Okay, so who is Evan Gershkovich? He is an American journalist reporting for the Wall Street Journal covering Russia. Again, they were refugees from the Soviet Union who arrived in the United States in 1979. His parents were, rather. He was born in the United States in 1991. He's 32 years old. And, of course, graduate of Bowdoin College. Classic. It seems like they turn out so many journalists. I don't know what it is. Essentially, he worked for the New York Times, then the Moscow Times, then the French press agency, and then moved to the Wall Street Journal. He'd been living in Russia for 6 years at the time of his arrest and was based in the Journal's Bureau in Moscow, covering the Russo-Ukrainian War, and was also covering Wagner Group. So it's likely that the regime had their eye on him for a long time. Obviously, independent press in Russia really not having a great time of things. I'm sort of shocked that he lived there for 6 straight years, knowing full well he was likely on a shortlist for the FSB, again, for covering the Russo-Ukrainian War. As you guys know, in Russia, it's considered a what we would call like a felony offense or a very serious offense to even discredit the military by talking smack on the Russo-Ukrainian War. So having bylines in something like the Wall Street Journal is likely going to almost immediately going to get you flagged. And of course, when he was in Yekaterinburg, the FSB detained him for having, quote, Russian information on a Russian defense enterprise on a phone, and he was collecting secrets on the production and repair of military equipment for the CIA. This is all things that you would expect a journalist to do, right? And he, of course, was arrested, given a sham trial, and detained, right? You might recall even Tucker Carlson in his interview with Putin begged essentially Putin as a gesture of goodwill to release Mr. Gershkovich. Even Tucker Carlson, right, somebody who's pretty pro Putin and really did stand for Putin pretty hard in that interview in that series, still out there going to bat for a fellow journalist, right? The other person who was detained was Paul Whelan, a Marine Corps reservist born in Canada, who had been held for almost 6 years. And he was a former cop for 12, and then worked as an IT manager for a staffing company, right? And then worked as a senior manager of global security operations for a private company. He had enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve, took leave from 2003 to 2008. It's been 3 years as an activated reservist, including time in Iraq. He was a staff sergeant in a Marine Air Control Group. So again, this is somebody who has had kind of an in and out sort of career. He was court-martialed, convicted on multiple counts related to larceny, I mean stealing, and then reduced to E4 and given a bad conduct discharge. And again, for you to get kicked out of the Marine Corps in 2008, you had to literally be like breaking into safes and stealing stacks of cash. In fact, even that might not have gotten you that. You probably would have to be even more brazen. So, okay. Attempted larceny, 3 specific dereliction of duty, making a false official statement, wrongfully using someone else's social security number, and 10 times of making and writing checks without having funds to make. So writing bad checks. So it sounded like kind of a big time fraudster. And then was director of global security investigations for Borg Wagner, an American automotive and e-mobility supplier. Very weird stuff, right? He did have some contacts in the U.S. intelligence community, federal agents, and foreign embassies. Not crazy, but also a little on the weird side, right? Of course, he traveled to Russia a bunch, likely to related to manufacturing with Borg Wagner. This, of course, he was arrested in 2018, long before the Russo-Ukrainian war, by the FSB. And was arrested there in some kind of weird convoluted thing with a passport and a friend. Honestly, sometimes when you hear these like crazy stories, it's tough to know what the real deal is with this guy. But as a general rule, if you're already a criminal, you're likely not working for U.S. intelligence. U.S. intelligence, while they're good at some things, they are absolutely terrible about finding the actual people who can live in the gray, so to speak. They really just get a bunch of like Mormon types who've never had a beer and then are shocked that they're really bad at infiltrating like terror groups or Chechen rebels or whatever. So, I don't believe this guy could have held a security clearance, let alone been a member of the CIA. So again, this seems like just a shady dude who knows how to get things done, right? And sometimes, guys, I'll just reveal that some of these director of security investigations for a automotive supplier, sometimes that can be code for, I'm going to say like a fixer, right? And what I mean is like, okay, let's say in Russia, you say, listen, we want this Russian factory to, and this is me speculating, I don't have any special insight into Paul Whelan. But let's say, in general, a company says, listen, we want to manufacture batteries for our e-scooters in Russia. But we want to make sure that this contract and the import-export fees and everybody like that needs to play ball isn't going to hold things up unnecessarily. Well, that requires a little bit of grease in the wheels, especially in a country like Russia. Problem is, in the United States, especially when it's a country that's subject to U.S. sanction, it can be seen as illegal to bribe people, right? You can't just go and pay bribes, especially depending on where the money's coming from. So it can be helpful to have someone on your retainer who is willing to operate in the gray areas of the world, in the gray spaces, and get in there and, maybe not fully document where the money goes. But that if you have him on the ground, he has a couple drinks with his friends, and, the parts always move smoothly through customs whenever Paul gets things done. That's kind of the vibe that I get from this. And so it makes sense then that he'd be on a short list as a former Marine and somebody operating inside Russia in that kind of gray area, that when the U.S. when Putin wants to get some leverage, he'd be on the short list for sure. Again, he likely, as someone who does this kind of work, probably is on the short list, at least of some embassy staff. Anyway, guys, that's really all I had. I'm going to keep this story posted as we learn more about it. But a huge thank you to everybody, especially the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News: James Sterling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knudsen, Bastian Hemmerling, Yanko Georgiev. Be sure to check that out and hit like on the video. That really makes a difference. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.